Namaste. So today, after a long time, I'm discussing a book. It's been a while. I always like discussing books and the message in a book with the author at hand. So I'm really glad that Hindol has agreed to come on the show after 1 year. So thanks a lot for doing this, Hindol.
Thank you for calling me.
So the book we are discussing today is The Man Who Saved India, Sardar Patel, obviously written by Hindol Sengupta. Getting a copy of this book was a marathon task, but that's a separate story. But it's an excellent book. I really had a great time reading it. So, Hindol, as they say, the first question you ask every author of a book is, why did you want to write a book on Sardar Patel? What was basically what came in your head when you were like, okay, I'm gonna, because obviously your last book was about Guru Tegh Bahadur, and then before that you had written the Modern Monk on Swami Vivekananda. So
Guru
from
Gobind Singh, the
yeah,
son
yeah,
of Tegh
Guru
Bahadur.
Gobind Singh. Sorry, I'm sorry. And Swami Vivekananda. So more of spiritual figures. So what I was trying to say is, from a spiritual angle and about spirituality and spiritual figures, you have jumped into the political arena. So why did you pick Sardar Patel?
Well, for a very simple reason that not too many people were writing or had written about Patel. If you look at the trajectory of Indian history and history writing since 1947, it's very clear that while really dozens and maybe hundreds of books have been written about Gandhi and Nehru, very few books actually have been written about Patel. The only big one can think about is a book that I think Rajmohan Gandhi wrote about 30 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, called Sardar Patel, really, a biography. And after that, Balkrishna, wrote a book on Balraj Krishna rather wrote a book on Patel called The Iron Man of India. But that didn't really get much traction. So the real book on Patel that everybody remembers is the one by Rajmohan Gandhi. But very few people have read it. It is also a big book, and also it's been 30 years since we've written about Patel. And ironically, Rajmohan Gandhi in his book begins in the first page by saying, while India has paid fulsome praise to two people among the trinity that brought it independence, Panditji, Mahatma Gandhi, and Sardar Patel, while attention has been fulsome, he says, in the case of Nehru, dutiful, he says, in the case of Gandhi, it has been niggardly in the case of Patel. And I wanted to change that at least 30 years later, that no longer should attention paid to Patel be niggardly. So I begin, as you know, in my book from that point, in a sense, where Rajmohan Gandhi leaves off, in a sense. I take up the mantle 30 years later and take up my book from that point on the niggardly attention given to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And I begin my book, as you know, by actually going back physically to the place he was born in Nadiad.
Yeah, and you bring out a very interesting incident in even when you travel. When you travel to the place, the hometown of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and you go to the specific place where I like how you deal with the lady in charge over there, where where she's actually looking at you, and it's like the reaction almost that I get from her is like, "What are you doing here?" It's like even she was not expecting someone to take interest in Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, which actually was so which saddens you at in a way, because as you said, these are the three colossus of Indian independence movement. I mean, you can't say either one of these three personalities had any less of a role to play in in making sure India got independence. But so first, let's touch upon that. So how did you feel, going to that place, going to the house, and going through the different materials? How was that feeling?
Well, it was a feeling full of nostalgia. I am not Gujarati, and I am always asked these questions. When I wrote about Guru Gobind Singh, people ask me, well, you're not Sikh, so how are you writing about Guru Gobind Singh? And when I wrote about Patel, people said, well, you're not Gujarati. But I really felt at Patel's home, his larger point that if we do not learn to see ourselves beyond our regional and parochial identities, India is doomed. I have actually mentioned this quote recently on Twitter. Patel had no doubts about this. Even today, we are discussing, yeah, as my book comes out, how North is different from South and how this is divided from that. All these debates continue. But in a sense, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel foresaw all that and said if the Indians, beyond their regional identities of being Gujarati and Bengali and Tamil and what have you, don't rise above these things, India is doomed. So, in a sense, his relevance is so alive even today.
That is so true. Now, everybody, when we have a discussion on Sardar Patel, like I've read Balraj Krishna's book on Sardar Patel, The Handmaid of India. But there is a trend, everybody knows that story when, he had that boil, and, it's pointless having those discussions about Sardar Patel because
That's why I didn't write about the boil.
yeah, I know. I was just about to mention that point, that I'm so happy that you did not mention that obvious point in your book, which is written in every freaking article or every textbook about Sardar Patel, as if him poking himself with that hot iron rod to get rid of this boil was everything about his personality. And I was like, when I started reading the book, I was like, oh God, Hindol, please don't write about that story. And you had not written about it, but so for me, what I wanted to discuss with you, as far as this book is concerned, is like how you mentioned in the beginning of our discussion. There are three key figures in our independence movement. One is Nehru, one is Mahatma Gandhi, one is Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. To me, these are three key figures in our movement. What I found beautiful via this book was how you have portrayed the relationship between Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and Mahatma Gandhi, and then the three of them on some common issues where there is a lot of times where Gandhi ji is kind of stuck in the middle between the two. So I wanted you to elaborate about these three facets that you have tried to cover.
Yeah, it's a difficult relationship. Remember, Nehru is younger than the other two, and Patel is only 6 years younger than Gandhi. Though it has to be mentioned, remember that Patel basically invented his life birth year. In those days, people didn't have birth certificates in that sense. So he was never very sure which year he had been born. So he invented, in a sense, his birthday, right?
Yeah.
But suffice it to say that he was closer in age to Gandhi than he was to Nehru, or than Nehru was to Gandhi. So, in a sense, Gandhi had a more paternal relationship with Nehru. Even with Patel, when Gandhi died, remember Patel wept at his feet and said he did not, his parents he only remembered perfunctorily. His real memory of having parents was Mahatma Gandhi and Kasturba. Right?
Yeah.
So these are complicated relationships. In polemical arguments, these people become, 2D cutouts of themselves. These were very complicated people with complicated histories. And there is no doubt that they felt a lot of affection and respect for each other. My entire problem is while we acknowledge the affection and respect they felt for each other, we should not try and paper over their differences, because then we are doing great harm to the understanding of our own history.
Yeah, but when we talk about differences, like my takeaway from reading the book and the exchange of letters, where like you've shared a lot of correspondence from Gandhi to Nehru or Patel to Nehru or Nehru writing to them. The correspondence, what I see is it was more a battle of ideas. Like there here was Nehru, who was a staunch socialist, who has a fascination with certain ideals of socialism, and Gandhi was a very devout Hindu for whom his entire worldview stemmed from his understanding of Hinduism. And to me, in all of this, I see a very realistic pragmatist in Patel. So what was your take on the personalities of all these three figures?
No, I think you're right. It's just that remember Nehru, while he had great sympathies for socialism, never really went the whole hog, which is one of the problems the socialists also had with him. that he never went the whole hog. And I think that's probably Gandhi's influence on him. Or perhaps Nehru was not a person who went the whole hog on many things. That may be his basic personality. Gandhi, yes, you're right, was greatly influenced by Hinduism, but I think his Hinduism was also tempered a lot by, in a sense, Renaissance Christianity, or his idea of Renaissance Christianity. Because there are a lot of Christian ideas in what Gandhi is saying, even though he sort of meshes the two and gives it a Hindu paraphernalia or gives it a Hindu framework, right? Among all of them, I think Patel is the one who's most grounded, if I may use that term. Patel is very grounded. He's a man of the masses, from the masses, a son of a villager, a son of a peasant. And he doesn't, as I say in the book, Panditji had to go and discover India. That's why he wrote The Discovery of India.
Yeah.
Patel never had to discover India. That's the biggest difference. Because Patel always knew India. Patel had come from the earth of India. He had come from a peasant's family. He understood the Indian grassroots only too well. So he didn't have to discover India.
Yeah, it's a very valid point. And as you mentioned in the book, the famous quote by Nehru, where he says, I was the last Britisher, I'll be the last Britisher to govern or rule India.
Last Englishman, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty much it. And another facet that comes out of the book is, the difference of the class difference in Nehru and Patel, where, at times I feel Nehru has a very different take on issues, sometimes a very paternalistic take, while Patel does not have a paternalistic take. Patel is like, these are our people, let's hustle. Patel, I think the right word for Sardar Patel in urban slang or urban lingo would be that of a hustler. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I understand how you mean that, and there is some degree of truth to that, in the sense that he was pragmatic. He basically wanted to do what works, and he was very close. In politics, they say that a politician must always have their ear to the ground, and hear what the people are really trying to say and what is really going on, instead of living in this ivory tower of idealism and romanticism, where you don't understand what people are really demanding. I think, as I've always said and said in the book also, Mahatma Gandhi is the spiritual core of the freedom movement, whereas Pandit Nehru is its romantic idealism, right? He has a romantic ideal. It's almost that he is sometimes not seeing India as it is, but seeing India as he would like it to be.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Sardar Patel is seeing India in that moment, in that year, in that month, in that day, as it really is, warts and all, with all its problems, and without any, rose tinted glasses.
That's true. And I think the key expression of what you have said comes off in the economic policies of Sardar Patel, which I want you to elaborate on, because there is a lot of confusion when it comes to, let's say, even when we have these, Twitter discussions, or you have these dining room discussions about what would have been the direction of India, as in, let's say, thought experiment. If Patel would have been in charge of the economy, and if India would have followed the economic policies recommended by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, what do you think would have been the scenario? What would India have been in terms of the size of the economy today? Obviously, I'm not saying that would be the exact answer, whatever answer you give, but in your view, what was Patel as an economist, or what was his understanding of economics?
So I think one thing we know for sure, that Patel definitely, more than Gandhi or Nehru, especially Nehru, was on the side of Indian industry. Because remember, people forget that Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had to raise money for the national movement. Gandhiji wanted to be austere, that famous statement that it took a fortune to keep Gandhi poor, right?
Yeah.
It took a lot of money to keep Gandhiji in poverty. Pandit Nehru really didn't want to. He was a socialist. So he wanted nothing to do with the corrupt industrialists, so to speak, right? But somebody had to raise money for this movement. How would this gigantic national movement work? People are always writing to Patel saying, give us money for this, send us money for that. Who's going to pay for all this? So Patel had to have a very deep and intricate relationship with the Indian industry, especially with G.D. Birla, which I mentioned in the book. Right? G.D. Birla famously said that my relationship with Sardar Patel is he just tells me in a chit how much money to send. Right? And I just do it. That's my relationship. So, and after independence, also Nehru didn't want Patel to be too close to the industrialists. But Patel was very clear that look, these people have helped us through the national movement. They've paid for it, through our entire journey. Today, for me to dismiss my friends would be very unfair. And he continued his good relationship with them. So he was definitely pro-Indian industry. In fact, he vociferously stood against that interim budget of Liaquat Ali Khan, which I mentioned in the book. Which basically would have led to the ruin of Indian industry, heavy taxation, and so on and so forth. So Patel stood against that and wanted to give Indian industry a chance to blossom.
But also at the same time, would it be fair to say that Patel was not the classical, fiscal conservative in the modern sense?
Well, he couldn't have been because, the situation then was really that India was extremely poor, needed all the help it could get, and you couldn't be a traditional fiscal conservative because the government had to spend. Most people were extremely poor. If the government didn't give handouts, they would die. India was very, very poor at independence. So classic fiscal conservativeness doesn't even arise. The question doesn't arise here, right? But he was definitely wanting to promote Indian industry.
So if I was to say, would it be a safe bet? Somebody said, where would you put your money? Would India have been better off on the economics front if Patel's model of economics would have been followed vis-a-vis Nehru's?
These are all contrarian versions of history. As you know, it's hard to say. I can only say that I think Patel would have definitely tried to do more to push Indian enterprise and to curb issues like, natural issues that, in my state in Bengal, for instance, labor unions. He says in my book also, he says that at the end of the day, you say the socialists say revolution, revolution. What revolution do you want? Independence coming means we all have to work hard, be more productive, and build a wealthy country. And he says in one speech, which I've written in my book, that you cannot distribute before you earn. Yeah. You can only distribute what you earn.
Yes.
You cannot distribute that which you don't have.
Absolutely.
Right? You first have to earn. So let's focus on earning and becoming wealthy first.
Okay, another point. The evergreen, whipping boy of the current establishment when it comes to media is the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Now, you do bring the relationship between RSS and Patel, and my takeaway from that was that the relationship between RSS and Patel is neither what the establishment media wants it to be, and it is neither what the RSS BJP sympathy group wants it to be. I think it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, I agree, and I write this in my book, even in the the flap of the book. Look, Patel was very clear. He's the one who banned RSS, after Gandhiji's death, right? But he's the one who lifted the ban also. He argued with Nehru when Nehru said, no, the ban should continue. He said, well, today I have gone through all the papers and very carefully. Today there is no evidence. Tomorrow, if new evidence of, surfaces, we'll see what to do. But he was very careful about the RSS. He said that any group that wants to raise its own private militia is a bad idea. Yeah. But at the same time, he was not prejudiced towards the RSS. He sent Guru Golwalkar, as you know, to Kashmir to convince the Maharaja to sign the bond of accession with India, right? So he was willing to work with the RSS too. So I think he had a pragmatic, open mind there also. While Nehru, from the beginning, really does not like the RSS, but Patel had a very pragmatic mind. He wanted to work with the RSS where possible, but where he felt the RSS was creating trouble, he was willing to speak against them also.
Yeah, in a way, I think Patel's understanding of democracy was brilliant. Where, as you mentioned,
I agree.
Had
he was a great Democrat.
Yeah, where Patel was very clear when it comes to the question of militia. In a democracy, the monopoly of violence can only be with the state. So I would not
Absolutely.
let the RSS go down that line, and I will crush
Yeah.
you if you do that. That was
Yeah.
a very crystal clear message he gives. I will
Yeah.
crush you if you do that.
Yeah. I agree. And at the same time, of course, like I said, he sends Golwalkar to Kashmir and so on and so
Yeah.
forth.
So
He's willing to work with them. See, there is one place alone where Patel's democratic ideals is questionable, but in that place, so is Gandhi, so is Nehru's. It's basically when that infamous election when Patabi Sitaramaiah is beaten by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And Patabi Sitaramaiah, as you remember very clearly, was Gandhiji's man.
yeah,
Gandhiji had supported him, but Netaji still beat Padavi Sitaramaiah. But the Congress under Patel refused to cooperate with Netaji, and therefore he had to give up his position. So that is one sort of slur, in a sense, against the democratic ideals of Patel. But that he did for Gandhi, and it just, if Patel is to blame there, so is Gandhi.
that's true. And I think Patel also, post independence hardened the Section 144 too. In fact, that is also true, right?
Yeah, but remember, at that time, they had seen enormous bloodshed in the name of partition. So their idea of national security was far more heightened than it is today or any other part. Because they had actually seen in front of their eyes. Today nobody has seen that sort of bloodshed, millions of people being killed and so on and so forth, losing their homes, maybe a million people killed. All of that, if you see what the state will, so the fear of the state that the country will break up was very, very, very potent.
One I have. It's good you mentioned Subhash Chandra Bose. One more, I think, angle that not a lot of people must be knowing, even if they know superficially about Sardar Patel, is his relationship with Subhash Babu. And
Yeah, very bad relationship.
oh yeah, that was not fun. That relationship was not at all fun. So could you
No.
share a few insights on that?
Yeah, so I think they never really got along. And Patel, I think, really saw Netaji as a bit of an upstart. And his basic objection was Patel was very loyal to Gandhi. Netaji was, was the hard left in a sense, at least for some time within the Congress party. And they basically wanted to break away from Gandhi. To begin with, Nehru was also had sympathies for this group, but then he was also quite loyal to Gandhi, so he backtracked. But Netaji was clearly unafraid to go against Gandhi, and Patel basically was very protective towards Gandhi and wanted the Congress to go down the path that Gandhi said, right? So in that sense, he was very devoted to Gandhi. And yeah, I mean, his relationship was not good with Gandhi, with Netaji. And remember, when Netaji had to leave the Congress, Sarat Bose, Subhash Chandra Bose's brother, elder brother, wrote a very nasty letter to Gandhiji accusing Patel of, in a sense, jeopardizing Netaji's presidency and basically rousing the Congress party against Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Later on, of course, Patel's elder brother Vittal Bhai also left his money to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and Patel again had to fight a case against Netaji's family and so on and so forth. So all of this happened. So there was a bitter relationship.
I would like to add one more factoid to this, that it's not that Patel fought the case for the money coming to him. He actually gave it
No,
to a
he
charitable
gave away the
trust.
money.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because people might just listen to this podcast and think, oh, Patel was after money. No, 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 no,
No,
he was
no, no, no,
not.
no. He gave away every penny.
Yeah, he gave away every penny to a trust. So I mean, it's
Yeah,
just that he was a man of principles, and if he stuck to his principles and somebody opposed them, it was basically in Patel's world, it was game on. Let's
I
get it
agree.
on. Yeah.
I agree.
Now, obviously, no discussion on Sardar Patel can be over without the famous thought experiment of what if Patel was the prime minister of India. I know it's the most cliched question discussed on every single Indian dining table and over nasta and chai, but I have to ask you. And obviously, I'm going to add to that. But so, do you think Patel should have been the first prime minister of India after your extensive research on this whole?
But let me say this. I don't entirely buy the argument that illness alone made him incapable of being prime minister. Because I do think if the man was fit enough to bring together all these states, more than 550 of them, And what kind of tension, what kind of stamina would have been required to get this done? Then he had enough stamina to be prime minister also. But having said that, there is no doubting the fact that he was very unwell and very ill. Remember, by the end of 1950, he's dead, right? So he was extremely unwell. His body had been broken because he had, survived 2 plagues in Ahmedabad, of course, then jail and so on and so forth. Uh, I think we will never know whether Sardar Patel would have been made a better prime minister or not. But I do think we know that Sardar Patel would have been a very different prime minister. His focus would have been far more grounded. He would have worried less about international, what internationally people are thinking or not thinking about India. He would have put India's interests first. He would have taken less cues internationally. And he would have been far more focused on India's internal security needs. Remember, in the last 2 letters, as I mentioned in my book, he writes to Girija Shankar Bajpayee and to Pandit Nehru, very clearly warning them of the dangers to come, whether it's from China, whether it's from European missionaries in the Northeast, whether it's from Pakistan. Everything that Patel warned about finally came true. So he was prescient about all these things. So therefore, he obviously thought hard about India's security needs, and he would have been a very powerful figure in defending India's security needs. That we cannot dispute at all. Also, I don't think the Kashmir issue would have gone to the UN had Patel been prime minister. Also, we may have never had Article 370 had Patel been prime minister. As I write in my book, the whole of the Congress party was against it. Nehru left the task to Patel, so he had to fulfill it and convince the party, but he was not very convinced about it. So these are things that perhaps would have been true. But having said that, I mean, these are all contrarian positions to history. History is as it is, and Nehru did become prime minister, Patel did not. But Patel's warnings ring true even today.
Now, here's the important question. This is my googly. So, Patel becomes the prime minister. Somebody else has to become the home minister. Now, what do we do if Nehru becomes the home minister of India?
Well, look, I mean, the assumption of that googly is that that the prime minister would have vetoed many things that the home minister would have wanted to do, right? And you're right that it's a very interesting scenario of Pandit Nehru being home minister. But I think Patel as prime minister would have been powerful enough to veto many of these things. So it would have definitely been an interesting scenario because definitely Panditji would have been a very different kind of home minister than Patel was.
I would be blatantly categorical in stating if Nehru would have been the home minister. My biggest worry is that Patel as a home minister had a veto power in a lot of issues. He basically went against the wishes of Patel in a lot of cases, even in Hyderabad. I mean, if you look at
Nehru.
Yeah, Nehru had a lot of objections what Patel was doing as a home minister in Hyderabad, but Patel basically said, "I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You do your thing as a prime minister." Yeah. Now, imagine Nehru saying that to Patel when Patel is the prime minister. Then you have obvious problem child like Junagadh. I mean, you have mentioned the Junagadh case. You have mentioned Hyderabad. And you have also mentioned, the larger Rajputana area. They were planning to have a separate, consortium sort of.
Jodhpur,
So, it scares me at times, after reading your book, that was the first thing that came into my mind. Thank goodness VP Menon was working with Sardar Patel and he was not working with Jawaharlal Nehru. I don't know what would have happened if he was the Home Minister of India.
True. No, true. I agree. I mean, this is a valid concern. We will, of course, never know the truth. Like I said, they would have been very different as home ministers. One just hopes that had that been true, Patel would have had more veto power.
Yeah, that's the thing. And considering the main factor in this whole thing is Mahatma Gandhi, because when push came to shove, where everybody in the Congress working committee says Patel should be prime minister, Gandhi vetoes them. I mean, Patel.
Things like Patel says that, this 55 crores that is owed to Pakistan. Patel said that, okay, we will, of course, give the money to them, but let's sit down and agree on a border, right? Let's solve the problem.
Yeah.
Mountbatten disagrees, Nehru disagrees, Gandhi goes on a fast. So Patel has to backtrack, right? But imagine if he could have got his way and salted it, used real politics and said, look, solve it, here's the money. We could have solved it.
Yeah, I think if Patel would have had his way in a lot of things, we would not have had these evergreen problems in India. We would not be as populated as we are today. He would have definitely spoken about the population explosion in India. And I'm not giving a community based answer. I'm just giving a general analysis of the population of India. And obviously, we would have been a far like in my fair assessment. I think India would have been a larger economy in terms of size, in terms of how many $1 trillion economy we would have been. I think we would have been far bigger. What's your take?
Well, we would have definitely probably liberalized earlier. I don't think under Patel we would have waited till 1991 to liberalize. Maybe not. But the contrarian part of that is Patel was so pro Indian industry. How far he would have opened up India's industry under pressure from his industrialist friends is a good question. But we can only argue that as a pragmatic man, he would have seen other countries grow very fast and would have opened India's economy.
No, another sad side that I have observed in today's discussion is obviously we are a Nehru obsessed society. I mean, the whole Parivar obsessed society. We get it. I mean, everybody knows that. But what saddens me is that at the end of the day, still Patel was a man from the Congress party. He was a Congress party worker. Literally, if you want to call a cadre of Congress, it was literally Patel who built that cadre for
Yeah,
Congress.
undoubtedly.
And today, you look at the way the legacy of Patel is not celebrated inside the Congress party. I mean, I'm very open. I like about my voting preferences. Yeah, I vote for the BJP, but I not even once do I want Congress as a political setup to be destroyed in India. I'm not one of those Congress Mukta Bharat type BJP voters. I believe India needs the opposition. Let there be different ideas floating
And
around.
of course, and look, I mean, the thing is, I mean, traditionally, my parents always voted Congress. Like we all voted. Like many families in India, traditionally, we all. I mean, whoever I vote or don't vote for today is irrespective. That is my choice as an individual. But I can tell you, for instance, that I voted for Sheila Dikshit, who was a great chief minister of Delhi and did good things for the city. And I think she was a person who really had a vision for Delhi. So there have been chief ministers of Congress and leaders of Congress who've done good things, right? But
Yeah,
let me also say that one of my problems with the Congress in the past has been, and I've mentioned this to many of my friends in the Congress, that it never accepted liberalization. It never wholeheartedly embraced liberalization, which is the best thing it did for the country, right? It is a story that began with Patel and then pushed by Rajiv Gandhi, taken forward by P.V. Narasimha Rao, but the Congress never embraced entirely its legacy of liberalization because of the problems with P.V. Narasimha Rao and so on and so forth. But even if they had a problem with P.V. Narasimha Rao, Rajiv Gandhi had pushed it too. Rajiv Gandhi definitely pushed through some of the liberalization, first strains of economic liberalization in India, right? So actually, Congress really helped the country open up and become a different country, but they never completely embraced it. They clung on to their old socialistic roots. That's the problem, right? I wish the Congress entirely embraced its liberalization heritage, right? Um, and in a sense, that liberalization heritage was later on taken over by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh at least in his first term, and then now by Narendra Modi, right? If you look at the trajectory of economic freedom in India, begins from Sardar Patel, goes through Rajiv Gandhi, who pushes it a little further, but dies young, so that he can't do more than that. Then goes on to P.V. Narasimha Rao, who gives it a big push. Then goes to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who again gives it a big push. Manmohan Singh, in his first term at least, gives it a push, and then Narendra Modi. That's the history of economic freedom in India, right? I wish the Congress embraced it more.
Yeah, I think my biggest grouse with the Congress party is that the Congress party has betrayed its own heroes because, a lot of heroes of India came out of the Congress party, and I don't know why the
Yeah,
Congress has basically betrayed their own heroes like Lal Bahadur Shastri,
yeah.
Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. I think PV Narasimha Rao is a hero. No, the man opened our economy. He's a
Agreed.
hero. For me, he is one.
See, the thing is, I mean, if you really think about it, at the end of the day, the RSS, and I wrote a big essay in Fortune magazine a few years ago about this, the BJP has always had a complex history of economics, right? Because the RSS economics, traditional traditional Deen Dayal Upadhyay kind of economics is very close to the socialist economy, right? It talks about, nationalized industries. It talks about Swadeshi economics and all of that, right?
Yeah.
But the RSS has progressively changed. As Walter Anderson also writes in his new book, there has been a progressive change. And much before that, I wrote in my essay, about the RSS and the BJP in Fortune magazine about 8-9 years ago. There has been a consistent change to embrace this entire idea that foreign direct investment we don't have a problem with, open up the economy further. But even within the BJP, there is a tussle, right, between people who don't believe in this open markets, free markets, and people who do. But I think even the free markets idea is fairly complex because we never took a culture into the prism of understanding free markets. Today, we take culture as a very important part of free markets. We understand that even the free markets cannot be exactly the same thing, cut and paste in every country. It has to then accommodate culture. So then you have to take all that into account. So it's an interesting history. But yeah, the Congress for sure should embrace its history of the free markets.
Not only should the Congress embrace the history of the free markets, the Congress should be worried when the BJP starts, appropriating, to use
Yeah.
the term with courts,
Yeah.
the BJP appropriating their leaders and
Yeah.
celebrating their successes. I mean,
Yeah.
is the Congress party that intellectually bankrupt today? I mean, that's all I can say to them. I mean, and I think Congress's attitude today, with some of its leaders, can be summed up by the last paragraph of your book. And I want to read that paragraph. This basically is after Sardar Patel's death, for the listeners, when Sardar Patel's daughter, Maniben Patel, goes and meets Nehru. And Hindol ends this book with this paragraph. So I wanted to read this. And I think this paragraph sums up Congress's relationship with the non-dynasty leadership in its history. So here we go. Eulogies poured in from every side. Years after his death, when Varghese Kurian, the first organizer of daily cooperatives in Gujarat, who's also called the father of India's White Revolution, met Maniben Patel, she told him that she had gone to meet Jawaharlal Nehru after her father's death to hand him a bag of money that people had donated in cash for the Congress party. He, in brackets Nehru, did not ask her where she was living or how she was making ends meet. To me, that paragraph, Hindol, that you have ended your book with, I think that says it all. That says the legacy of Sardar Patel in this country and why this book that you have written, this book was needed. And I think that was the best ending you could have chosen for that book. So,
Well, Varghese Kurian, Varghese Kurian is very clear. There's no doubt about this anecdote. Varghese Kurian writes about it in his own autobiography, right? And when I read this anecdote, it really disturbed me, right? And I thought it was only a befitting way to end the story.
no, I think nobody could have ended the story of Sardar Patel in a better way. And I say this with full honesty. When I read this book and when I ended it, there was like, in my head, I call it the state of silence. I like, in my brain, there was like 5 to 7 minutes of silence. I was not able to comprehend. Like, you lose words in the end. You have mixed emotions. You have sadness. You have anger. And at some point of time, I was like, why would you do that to your most powerful nation, leader of the nation? And, the way India is today and the way Narendra Modi has basically taken over the legacy of Sardar Patel by building the statue, I think this paragraph pretty much sums it. I guess that's all I can say.
I was chatting with Ram Guha as the book was coming out, and I think he's right. He says that the Congress rejected Patel in a sense, and the BJP misappropriated Patel in a sense that basically suggesting, and I think there's an important point there, that both those two pictures are two-dimensional cutouts. Patel wasn't as much a fervent, ideological co-traveler of the BJP as some might want to suggest today. However, he was a far deeper his descent with the Nehruvian legacy was far deeper than some people might want to suggest. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
In debates today, we are making him a cutout, right? A two-dimensional cutout. It's far more complicated than that. He was not entirely like he was equally a critic and sometimes a co-traveler on some issues with the RSS, but equally a deep critic of some of the aspects. But he was also a deep critic of many Nehruvian aspects, right? So we have created all these complicated characters. We have made into two-dimensional cutouts, and I think we shouldn't do that. Also, I want to end by saying that in spite of all the problems, of course, you have to appreciate that these people were very close to each other because they didn't really have a family of each other. They were their own family. Look at Gandhi, what a disturbed relationship he has with his family. Look at Nehru, barely a family, right? Look at Patel. His wife appears on the scene and disappears. Barely anything is known about her, right? His own daughter says that my father could never show me any love, right? So where did all these familial attributes or familial attributes go? Towards each other. They were the people closest to each other. So they had a lot of affection and respect. And I completely admit that between Gandhi and Nehru and Patel, and between Nehru and Patel, there was enormous respect and affection. But, and this is a very powerful but, in the garb of that, we cannot paper over or hide their very strong differences. They're very critical differences. We cannot ignore or avoid their very critical differences. That's the thing to remember.
Oh, absolutely. And I would like to wrap things up with a very small message that I took out from from your book. And anybody who watches this or listens to this on the audio version, I have to say this: when you read Hindol's book, and I'm going to leave the link from where you can buy the book, the Amazon link in the description of the podcast. So do click and buy this book. I really insist you guys, this is the book. Please buy it. But for me, the biggest takeaway is this: if you're an average Indian citizen, when you read this book, you study the life of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, you basically understand what is firmness and clarity of thought. I think that's what comes across. But if you're a politician, and I don't know how many politicians listen to my podcast, but if ever a politician in India can learn so much from the relationship between Gandhi, Nehru, and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, that was a relationship of matbhed, not manbhed. All the three people, they would never compromise on the non-negotiables of India. They were all for for making India a powerful nation. So Hindol, I would like to thank you on two accounts: A, obviously, for coming and having this chat with me, and two, thanks a lot for writing this book. Thanks a lot for reminding
Thank you very much.
people that there was a great man like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and we need to talk more about him. So thanks a lot, man.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Take care.